Yes. We will all be experts in love by the end of the period.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Easier said than done. Hello, everybody. It's good to be with you again. It's always more fun to point out other people's thoughts instead of your own. So let's do a little bit of that, and let's see how many sources of division we can identify in the congregation in Corinth. So they were turned against each other in all different ways. What were some of the sources of that, or how did that division manifest itself? John? Okay, I follow Paul, I follow Apollos, I follow Cephas, I follow Christ. I'm better because of the pastor that I associate myself with, which really those statements were really just patting themselves on the back. The primary person in each of those statements is I. All right, others? The rich and the poor. Yeah, that one we talked about not long ago. What was the context of that? How were the rich and poor divisions manifesting themselves? That was in communion, yeah, where the rich people would go ahead with their own suppers to the point of overeating and drunkenness, and then going to the Lord's table together. Any others? Morris? Head coverings. Yeah, the issue with the head coverings is kind of, we don't know exactly what all was behind it, but it seems to have been that there were some women in the congregation who wanted to buck the societal norms for their role as women. I'm wondering if, I'm kind of testing what Pastor Lindemann taught you last week. I wasn't here. But did we see division last week? We talked about the body. What was that about? There were some people saying that they were better than others. They're the Morris?
Speaking in tongues and the different roles people had in the church.
Yeah. So God had given the Corinthians, as he does all Christians, different spiritual gifts. God gives each Christian at least one spiritual gift, one special, God-given way to serve others. And the one that the Corinthians coveted the most was speaking in different tongues. And they were elevating that among other gifts and implying that if you don't have this gift, you're not as good as I am. That's really the springboard for chapter 13. So in chapter 13, he says, every gift is important because you guys aren't all little islands where you're each doing your own thing to bring glory to yourselves. You're all part of one body. You are all baptized by one Spirit into one body. And there's one head to that body, it's Jesus. And just like your physical body is one body, but it has many different parts that have different roles, so it is in the body of Christ. Not everybody is a hand, not everybody is a foot, not everybody has an eye or an ear. And if you're an ear instead of an eye, that doesn't make you lesser than the person who is kind of like the eyeball. So whether your gift is speaking in tongues or simply encouragement, you all have a role in the body. It's from that Paul is going to go into a bit of a digression about love. And his emphasis in chapter 13 is that if you don't carry out your spiritual gift, if you don't use it in love, it's nothing. So the immediate context for this discussion about love has to do with the spiritual gifts, but it really serves as a key to the whole book, because wherever there is division, there is a lack of love. I follow Paul, I follow Apollos, I follow Cephas, I follow Christ. Or I can eat this idol food without it bothering me. I don't care if it bothers you. Or the rich and the poor. The root of that problem is a lack of love. Chapter 13 is one of the better known chapters of the Bible. Why so? Because it's often read at weddings. Weddings, good place to talk about love. Yeah, good place to talk about love. But so is a congregation that is fractured by a lack of it. So I just went on. I wanted to find out what love was from Wikipedia. So I went to Wikipedia and wanted to see how they defined it. And this was pretty close to the top when it came to the definition. And it said the word love can have a variety of related but distinct meanings in different contexts. So related but distinct. Cultural differences in conceptualizing love make it difficult to establish a universal definition. So no wonder there's so many songs about it, like, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. But that's just one example. There's a whole lot of songs about what love is. Can we? I don't have much of a PowerPoint today, but I have a feeling that if I ask you what is the biblical definition of love, that would be a pretty short conversation. There would be a few people in here that have heard me say it enough that they would just spout it all out. So let's start by talking about the different ways that love is conceptualized in our culture. So the waters in which we swim, what does love mean to people? And there's more than one answer to this question.
The book answers, aren't there 5 types? Philo, brotherly, agape, unconditional, and then there's one that's familial.
Are you answering this question, or are you jumping ahead?
That's about love.
Okay. Okay. So some people conceptualize it in 5 different realms? Okay.
I think it's most commonly and loosely used as just liking something.
Okay. An intense form of liking? And what does it mean to like something? Something that makes you happy, you enjoy it. So if something makes you really happy, you really enjoy it, like ice cream, then you love it. Okay? So very fair. I think that is a chief way that it's used. Don?
I was going to say, it's the feeling that I get when I see my wife.
Just so that we're not making assumptions. Sarah asked me what we were going to talk about today in Bible class, and I said love, and she said, are you going to embarrass me? And I said, I'm not planning to, but who knows what's going to come out of my mouth. So thank you for beating me to it, Don. So I think, Don, you're expressing like an emotion, especially, for some of us, that emotion is sustained over the duration of the decades-long relationship. For other people, maybe it's something that you especially feel at the beginning of the relationship when all you can think about is that person, and you have the butterflies in the stomach kind of thing that kind of fades. For some people, kind of fades over time. Okay. We have intense liking. We have the emotional, like related emotions that come from being in the presence of something that you really like. Any other?
A lot of people define love as in a physical way.
Okay. I think love is probably one of those words that you need to be careful of when you Google stuff. Do you agree? Yeah. There is Luke was getting at this before, that a Greek word for love is eros. Erotic comes from that. So they had largely a different a word for that that aspect of our concept of love. And we just kind of lump it all into the same piece of dough. In those ideas that we've come up with, is love more about what I get or what I give? I'd say this is where the biblical concept of love is the opposite of a cultural understanding of love. So in culture, more about what I give or what I get? Of what I get, yeah. So if I really like something a lot, it's because I really get a lot of stuff out of that. Let me just move on to the next question. This is the extent of my PowerPoint presentation. And you can tell I did this right before church. In what ways does in what ways does a perverted conception of love hurt and destroy people? When it is all about me, can we just think about the destruction that causes?
Yeah, when it's transactional, you're always expecting something. And that's not part of this equation if you're doing it right.
Yeah. If I'm loving in order to get, then what happens when I stop getting it? I move on. I retaliate. I become passive aggressive. I hurt people. Any other ways that it, Nancy? Oh, sorry, stretching. Any other ways that it hurts or destroys people? John?
Perverted can have a lot of long-term implications. Like you can really feel good in the short term, but there can be long-term impacts when you're not focusing on God and love, where it can really decay a person or decay the other person when God's not at the center of love, and then that can come out months down the road or years down the road where you find out that there was a big problem, and it can come out later on where someone realizes they were being manipulated or they were being hurt or harmed and they were actually being taken away from God in that action or that emotion they were feeling.
Very good. I'm gonna paraphrase some aspects of what you just said. A decay over time, and that decay can happen to two different parties: the party that is not loving like they should, and the party that isn't loved like they should be. Love is being turned outward toward others. It's a life that's lived for others. The opposite of that is a life turned in on yourself. And if you're turned in on yourself, our sinful natures are wired to be that way, but that is also self-destructive. You itch every scratch, and you live for yourself, and you are totally empty, and there's nothing good about it. And it might feel good for the moment, but over time that destroys you. Emily?
And if your perception of love is truly conditional, then not only are you expecting others to constantly express that, but you're also feeling like you need to constantly express that and give of yourself if you want to receive someone else's love.
If your concept of love is what I'm going to get out of it, then you're going to feel like you always need to perform you're always going to need to perform in order to receive love from others. Very good. Yeah. Very insightful comments. Sarah?
Yeah,
Don't embarrass me.
This is not what I mean, but it can leave one always disappointed when you're dealing with love with humans. You will always be left disappointed because we're not perfect, and you will disappoint people. Not in our case, of course.
Yeah.
One would be left disappointed.
Very good. It's almost like you know this from experience. That if you see everyone else as an opportunity to get, and I know that you know this because, well, I know it well. If you look at other people as an opportunity to get, and they don't live up to your expectations, there's a whole lot of bitterness, isn't there? And you're angry at people for not giving what you think that you deserve from them. And people are always going to disappoint. What about the damage that it causes? Let's go back to Paul's illustration of a body with many parts. What damage is it going to cause to the organization and the execution of the work of the body when there isn't love?
In regards to this statement,
Yeah.
I was thinking about this a second ago. So outside of just romantic relationships, if this is how you view love in the world around you, it's going to poison all of your relationships. You're going to be looking at people as things for you to use or opportunities or what you can gain instead of just being a part of the community and seeing how it can grow.
Yeah. Instead of a body, there's 100 different bodies, each with their own goals, and the body doesn't function. Morris?
Probably the best example is what we're looking at the church in Corinth, that has so many divisions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What makes it so hard to love? I'm getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. There's what makes it so difficult to love, to be turned outward and to live for the other instead of yourself? Morris?
Counter to our sinful natures. We
Okay.
want to be turned in on ourselves. Me, mine. It's all about what I can get. And trying to be opposite of our true natures is difficult.
Okay. So it's our nature. It's what's wired into us because of sin. Really, sin is selfishness. And the opposite of selfishness is love. And Jesus says the entire law can be summed up in a single commandment, which is love God and love your neighbor. So it goes against our nature. Is it possible to be a bit more specific than that about what kinds of feelings do we have, like in each moment? Yeah, we have the proclivity to go the selfishness route and to never go the selflessness route. But what are we thinking, like when we always go down the selfishness route? Luke?
To love like God, you have to do it selflessly, without any expectation. You have to give the person the freedom to either take it or leave it, and you have to be open to that.
Vulnerable?
Yes.
Vulnerable, at least?
Vulnerable, open to hurt.
Yeah. If I'm always looking out for others, who's going to look out for me? So in self-preservation, not wanting to get stepped on, to have fulfillment, we're going to turn to ourselves for that instead of leaving that to God. And that's why, that's why God says we love, because God first loved us. He gives us a new nature, and then he also gives us his promise. I've got you. You are free to love others because you will always be cared for perfectly. Even if your love is never reciprocated by any human being ever, God says, you'll be okay. All right, enough of an introduction. Let's start looking at the passage. The review and preview. Well, at least I think we've done we've captured the review. Just a preview in chapter 13. There's a threefold division to the chapter. So Paul emphasizes the necessity of love in the exercise of spiritual gifts. Oh, no, it's not even there. Without love, everything a person might do is worthless. And then the outline gives us the threefold division. The first three verses, the necessity of love, then the character of love, and then the permanency of love. So in the rest of the class today, we'll dig into those three aspects of love. Let's start with the first three verses. And in my Bible, the second half of verse 31 is really included in the section. So let's go verse 31 of chapter 12 through verse 3. Shannon?
But eagerly desire the greater gifts. And now I will show you the most excellent way. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, I can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge. And if I have faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing.
Okay. So previous chapter about spiritual gifts, and he doesn't say that spiritual gifts are bad, but remember that you're a body that uses these, each one using his gifts for the other. And now he takes examples of 3 spiritual gifts: speaking in tongues, prophecy, and we might say generosity. And he says, if you have these gifts and you have them to the superlative degree, but don't have love, it's nothing. A clanging sound, or a resounding gong, or a clanging cymbal. It's interesting that the order, the spiritual gifts that he uses as examples, in the order in which he puts them. So if I speak in the tongue of men, of angels, and have not love, which spiritual gift were the Corinthians elevating above all others? He starts with the one that they're most obsessed with. And did you talk last time about what we're talking about with speaking in tongues? Would somebody venture just an explanation of what he's talking about with speaking in tongues? Luke?
I think the initial reference is what happened at the Pentecost. All the different pilgrims were hearing the message of Peter in their own language.
They were hearing the message of the apostles in their own language because the apostles were speaking in those languages.
In known languages, though.
Okay, yes, in known languages. So the Parthians, Medes, and Edomites, they all heard him speaking the wonders of God in our own tongues. So this gift of tongues was a gift that God gave sometimes in the New Testament church, where a person would speak in a real language that they had not studied, that they, by obvious miraculous means, were able to speak. And that was one way that God demonstrated that there was something divine, supernatural going on here. So they would speak in known languages. So this would be like me just like breaking out in Chinese. I don't know anything besides ni hao, and I probably didn't pronounce that correctly. But if I started speaking in fluent Chinese, that would be an example. In chapter 14 next week, you'll talk more about this, and how Paul says if you speak in tongues and nobody can understand you, it's serving no purpose. If there's nobody to interpret what you're saying, then don't do it. But they found this one to be especially cool, and we're highlighting it. But if you don't have love when you do that, you're just making noise. What would incline a person to speak in a tongue, or to prophesy, or to give to the poor, besides love? Like, if somebody wasn't doing this for others, why would they even want to do these things? Maybe it's probably too easy of an answer, or too easy of a question.
It's for themselves, to make themselves feel good, look good. Nowadays we call it virtue. So you do things so that you look righteous in the eyes of others.
Because you look good, you feel good. This calls for introspection, I think, because that we each kind of examine what it is in our lives that means I'm worth something? What is it that brings me joy and meaning in life? And what is it that makes me important? And I think that we'll all find in our heart of hearts, it's something that we perform. It's something that we have to offer, which is not too far divorced from self-promotion. I like being a pastor. I like being a district president because people think that I have something worth saying, and it's kind of about building myself up. That's exactly what he's warning us about here. That whatever gift I have, if it's not being used for the other, then it's worthless. I'm not sure if do we want to talk about prophecy and giving everything I have to the poor. Prophecy as a spiritual gift. This was basically prophecy. I would equate it with the pastor preaching, speaking a word from God that is intelligible, that people can understand. And then he talks about generosity in the last one. So that's the necessity of love. If it's not, is that the word I use? The necessity of love. Now we go on to the character of love in verses 4 through 7. Anybody care to read? Love is, Bob? Can you look at Kathy when you read it? No, just kidding.
Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always preserves.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, always perseveres. So it always keeps on going, no matter what stands in its way. I'm going to point out something about this list, and then I'll ask us as a group to identify maybe some more things we notice about it. First, it's not so evident in the English translation, but in the Greek, he uses verbs, not adjectives. English, these things can't be conveyed. We don't have verbs for these things. So love is patient. Love long suffers. Love, there's a verb for to be kind. So these are, I think all of them are verbs. I think there's 15 different descriptions of the character of love. What would that they're all verbs? Does that really tell us something about love? Yeah. Yeah. It's not describing an emotion here. He's talking about an action here. That love is always in action by what it does and by what it doesn't do. We have some positives. I think we have even more negatives. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not self-seeking. His reason for using negatives when maybe he could have used positives. Easier.
Checklist of all the ways you're not supposed to be using these spiritual gifts, I guess.
Okay, yeah. Truly describe something. It helps to use both what it is and what it isn't. And when he says what it isn't or what it doesn't do, and we read this like I did that, and I didn't do that, I did do that. Okay, how about as a group? Anything else about the list? Whether about the individual things, maybe a question, or an observation about anything about it? Donald?
And when I hear that verse, it
Okay.
It's all those things.
Love is God. Maybe better, God is love. Because when we love, we're not God, but that God is all those things perfectly. That's a very important point. Let's make sure that we come back to that. It's a favorite verse at weddings. Would you say that it fits with our culture's conceptualization of love? I say no. And so if somebody is thinking about it beyond the poetic beauty of it, what kinds of things about it might make us kind of grimace, like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. John?
One of the ones that sticks out to me is love's not boastful, and society now is all about boasting about it.
Boasting about love. Okay.
You know, the one-upmanship of I show my love for others better than you do.
Okay.
Not
Like posting what you did for your wife on
Yeah,
Facebook or
yeah.
yeah. Who can give the biggest gift? Emily?
There's nothing in there that really talks about a feeling.
She said there's nothing in there that talks about a feeling, but rather action. Okay. And does that cause us to grimace a little bit, or our wider culture to say, I don't know if I like this kind of love? Sorry, I interrupted Megan's hand raise.
Love does not envy, and I think our society is very good at, unfortunately, with social media and the internet, making other people envious, or like when you're looking at something, then becoming envious of something else, and it's an unfortunate.
Okay. Is that called FOMO, sort of? Yeah. Harry?
The verses are really about you and what you do for somebody else. And today, it's all about what they do for us and how they make us feel. So the reason that you grimace at it, or people will grimace at it, is that it's completely, as you started this whole thing, it's completely opposite of what society today now wants out of love.
Yeah, very good point. So it's all about what I'm doing for someone else, not what I'm getting out of it. And then that our society today is like that. Like, let's remember that these words were just as fitting. It's just as fitting 2,000 years ago on the other side of the world. I don't say that to defend our culture, but just so we realize that what we experience, in some ways it might be more pronounced than in other times and places, but the sinful nature has remained the same. It's always about what you're doing for the other person, and in this list that he gives us, it tells us something about the other person. What does this implicitly tell us about the object of our love?
It always protects, trusts, hopes, and perseveres in the end.
Okay. In the end, good. I'm thinking more toward the beginning, that it's patient, that it keeps no record of wrongs. What is that implying about the person that I love? Harry?
They're not perfect. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to upset you. You need to be forgiving and continue to love them.
Yeah. Love is most clearly shown when it isn't reciprocated, when it's tested, when I am mistreated. Those are the opportunities to love where it shines most clearly. So love doesn't, when a relationship becomes full of animus, and maybe the husband and wife tell their kids, well, mommy and daddy just don't love each other like we used to. That's when love needs to be strongest, not when love gives up. That I think is one of the most striking things about this when I think about it. It's that we often feel like someone has exceeded what I am willing to put up with. And we think that that somehow gives us the right to hit back or to leave. The biblical concept of love is that when it's exceeded my patience and my forgiveness, that's when I show it most. Very different from the waters in which we're swimming now, but that's because the waters in which we're swimming now are the same that they've always been, and that they are influenced by the kind of heart that I inherited from my parents. Are there any questions about any of the particular attributes or verbs in here? Morris?
Just one other thing that I noticed is that it speaks about it in absolute terms. It's always this, and it's never that. And that is daunting because I know that I'm not going to be able to be successful at it, except during short spurts of time.
Okay. Yeah. That our attempts, our displays of love are kind of like a paraplegic running a marathon. Anything else about any particular thing on the list? How should we understand love always trusts? Love always hopes. Is this saying that if you love someone, you cannot question their, you can't ever question like the veracity of their expressions?
Not necessarily, because you can trust that they'll work through something and you'll grow, and that together you keep that spark of hope alive. Doesn't mean that there's never going to be bumps in the road.
If I'm married to a drug addict or an alcoholic that said they're no longer going to drink or do drugs, and they stumble into the room one night reeking of alcohol and they say, I haven't been drinking, if you really love them, does that mean, well, okay, I guess I got to believe them? Okay, Luke, they answered that for us. Elise?
I guess I don't think love is the person. So, no, you don't have to believe them. I mean, it's not the person, but love is what is being trusted. Right?
Love is doing the trusting. Yeah.
Right. So it's not the person.
Well, love it's sort of personifying the person in the love. Love is never present outside of a personality. So I'm convinced that since he talks about love, trusting and hoping, and he comes back to trust and hope at the end of the chapter, trust and faith are the same Greek word, that he's talking about the vertical axis, not the horizontal axis. That in order for us to love and to execute it, that always requires trusting in God. That's the only way it can persevere when none of my love is being reciprocated and I feel like I'm pouring myself out to no purpose. In order to do that, in order to persevere in love, it always perseveres. That means always trusting God's promises for me in the present, that's faith, and trusting in God's making everything right and new at the end. That's hope. Hope is being certain of something that we don't have yet in our hands, which is the restoration of all things in heaven. So those last four things, I would understand them that way. And I think that that's important, just an important distinction for us to make, so that we don't feel like we need like God is telling me that I have to trust somebody that has proven that they can't be trusted. That doesn't mean I don't love you when I don't believe you. Morris?
I say that the antidote to that is forgiveness. Because if you know that they've done something, regardless of what they say, and you forgive them, then you can continue in the relationship
And be patient and kind.
The expression of love in that instance is forgiveness.
Yeah, forgiveness, and it could be that there's forgiveness, and therefore there's no retribution. But also that love may say, like, you can't go out by yourself anymore, or I'm going to call the police. Even there's going to be some hard consequences, but because there's forgiveness, these are all for you, not for me. I'm not calling the police because I find any joy in seeing you suffer for all the harm that you've caused to me. John?
I was gonna say, it kind of reminds me of a story. I had a coworker years and years ago who became a drug addict and had kids, and marriage was falling apart, and kind of left the house, you know. And his wife kind of, along those lines, you know, was patient and everything else. And, you know, God eventually brought him back to the church. She remained faithful to God and her husband, and they got back together, and things worked out. So her, you know, thinking about what we're talking about with that love, being patient and kind and bearing all things, you know, that's just to me a real world example of it.
Yeah.
Too much today we see, oh, they left, I'm done. You know,
Yeah.
it's not patient, it's not bearing. It's thrown away easily, I guess.
And do you think that our society still, like, when there's a story like that of somebody that stands by and forgives and is patient, that we still see that there is something noble about that? Maybe at the same time where we say, yeah, dump that guy, you know, get rid of him, you deserve better. We might say that, but also maybe we realize, like, as a culture, like, that's something special about that person, that they were able to love and forgive even in the face of all of that, all of, you know, the stuff that she went through because of her husband. The permanency of love. I don't know if permanence or permanency is better. So 8 through 13, I'll take a turn. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part, but when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. The permanence of love. It never fails, it remains, it's the greatest. And in between those bookends, at the beginning and end of that section, we have a bunch of things that talk about the transient nature of spiritual gifts, prophecy, speaking in tongues, what was the knowledge, that those things pass away. Seasons change. You go from childhood to adulthood. Things pass away, but there's three things that remain: faith, hope, and love. What is he saying? I'm going to cover this more quickly than the other stuff. The Corinthians thought that these spiritual gifts, like speaking in tongues and prophecy and all those things, that made them better. And they thought, like, this is what makes me the better Christian. prophecy, speaking in tongues, all those things are good things. But Paul says there's going to come a time when they will have served their purpose and they are no more. And even now, just like a child doesn't understand things at the same capacity as an adult, as an adult brain, even now they don't have the fullness of love. So they're less than perfect when it comes to how long they last, and they're less than perfect in what they can accomplish. They're tools that God gives us to serve and love. Now, why won't prophecy or speaking in tongues and the gift of knowledge, why won't they always be around? Because in eternity, in heaven, we'll see God face to face. There won't be any intermediaries between us and God. There won't be people that don't know the gospel. But then, but in heaven, there will still be love. Because that's God's design that he wove into the universe. Together with love, he exalts faith and hope above those other things. Spiritual gifts are given and distributed as God pleases. But every Christian has faith, trust, has hope, certainty of what is to come, and love. Now, at the end, he says that the greatest of these is love. What makes love better than faith and hope? Did I say better or greater? What makes love greater than faith and hope? Yeah.
I think you just said it. It's going to continue with us into heaven.
Yeah. In heaven, see face to face. In heaven, there won't be anything yet to come, but there will still be a life lived for the other. And it will always be reciprocated by everything else. There will no longer need to be a commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and strength and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself, because that will be entirely natural. This whole selfishness thing, being turned in on ourselves, it's really interesting to me that that's what causes all of the pain in the world and all of the dissatisfaction. And even though it's the cause of it all, we're convinced, according to our sinful nature, we're convinced that it's the solution to it all. I just need to turn in and take care of myself in a dog-eat-dog world. But no, the solution is, and here's where we'll wrap up. The solution is that all of these things, that all of these descriptions of love, this isn't just God saying, hey, this is what you should be doing. Like, I forget if it was Don or John said, this is describing God's love. So this is the love that God has for me. It's patient, it's kind, keeps no record of wrongs. That's the only way that I can love. We love because he first loved us. God has changed our hearts by his love in giving his son for me. He's changed our hearts, and he also supports us with his promise that no matter how much of a punching bag you are to others, no matter how much of yourself that you give so that you feel like there's nothing left, and the only response you get is to get kicked in the teeth, you're okay because I love you. God's love enables our love. Amen. Sorry. Let's close with a prayer. Father in heaven, continue to pour your love out into our hearts through your Spirit in your word. Imprint the image of your Son on us that we may evermore conform into his likeness and love other people as you have loved us. And through that loving unity, make this congregation a shining beacon for all to see, that they may know our love and through our love know yours. Amen.